You shouldn't sell yourself. You you shouldn't sell yourself. Try saying that 5 times fast. All right, guys, I'm back, and it is a little hot today, but I have my trusty fan, and let's get started. So now is the time to click on the link. I don't know where it's going to be, but if it's not up here, it's going to be down in the description. So you can go back and watch chapters 1, 2, and 3, because this is the video for chapter 4. And there's going to be some spoilers. Okay, so let's start the recap. In chapter 3, hello. In chapter 3, we got introduced, we got to see Neesa go home from her time out with the girls, and got to meet her dog, Enola, and we got to see what her life is like at home. And probably you came to the same conclusions that I did, which is that her life is boring. So it's no wonder that her friend Claire is just like kicking her ass to like get out there and find a companion and shake up her life a little bit. And she was a little pushy, but you know, it's kind of necessary, I think. You know, sometimes in life, you know, it's those big pushes that get us to actually make forward movement in our lives and to force us to make the big changes. Like there's a pandemic going on right now. I mean, if you guys out there aren't making big changes in your life, then what are you doing? Okay, so now we're going to move on to chapter 4. I'd love to hear from you what you think about the story so far. Please drop a comment, because that totally helps my algorithms. And be sure to like the video, be sure to subscribe, and more importantly, be sure to hit the little bell icon, because that is how you get notified as soon as the next chapter goes up. And hopefully you'll be binge listening to this book series like you do your Netflix series. So let's start with chapter 4. This is going to be from Ruben's perspective. Ruben cursed as he pulled into the driveway of his modest 2-bedroom craftsman-style bungalow. Lights were on in the front rooms, and he'd only given one person strict access. Leah knew better than to show up unannounced. Uninvited intrusions, both physical and emotional, were the exact reasons he avoided commitments in his life, and he wasn't apologetic about it either. After playing 3 more rounds of pool and sending Annabelle and Claire home in 2 separate rides, he was still worked up enough about his last interaction with Denise, enough to have a good masturbation session. Leah was the last person he wanted to see, let alone think about, before he went to bed. He sat behind the wheel of his SUV, taking deep breaths. He hated being backed into a corner. It wouldn't do any good to confront her until he changed his attitude, so he let his mind naturally drift to thoughts of Denise and what excuse he would use to run into her. His job put him in the unique position of finding some other way to talk to her besides the phone number she'd given him, which was too easy to hang up on. Another face-to-face interaction might gain him the definitive answer he was still seeking in his case. He didn't know how he'd execute his plan yet, but the next time he talked to her, he would bring his A game. Remembering the way she moved in those jeans and heels excited him. He replayed it over and over in his mind. He was due for a good chase. Women in LA were too easy. Take Leah, for example. Lately, though, their arguments had turned what used to be fun interactions into tedious nightmares. In all fairness, Denise's case, or really the girl herself, consumed him. But he'd been clear about the transient terms of his relationship with Leah, and she agreed not to get attached. Chicks were always thinking they could change a man. He and Leah might not be able to recover from this. He hated to see her leave over something so trivial, but he knew where this was headed. He made sure the girls he dated weren't so serious that he couldn't step away clean. but he was enough of a masochist to feel bad each and every time it got to this point. He grabbed his leather shoulder bag from the passenger seat and squeezed out of his SUV, pressed against the tight confines of the garage wall. He replayed the last argument he'd had with Leah and dreaded what was about to happen. Inside it was quiet, the calm before the storm. Light streaked across the darkened kitchen from the window over the sink. He headed down the hallway for the second bedroom, which he used as his office, a short delay before the emotional carnage he was about to inflict upon his latest victim. He wasn't proud of his relationship history. The criticism from his conscience was harsh, but he knew some of his exes would agree. The chair creaked from the sudden weight of his messenger bag. Angst turned his stomach at what he was about to do. He'd been hearing a lot about toxic masculinity in the media lately, and boy did he fit that description. He took no pleasure from it. He flicked on the desk lamp and set his bag down in the chair. Cat wasn't in his usual place, though a sparse nest of black and white hairs on the windowsill indicated he'd spent most of the day there. Cat didn't warrant a formal name. He'd been a stray Reuben had accidentally fed and kept coming back for more until he'd moved in. He wasn't a pet guy, and it pissed him off that he'd developed all sorts of irrational fears about Cat getting poisoned by a sadistic neighbor or hit by a car while crossing the street. He'd grown to care for the damn thing. The furball was no doubt cozying up to the enemy in the living room. Reuben couldn't fault Cat for loving the ladies. The two of them were, after all, a couple of eligible bachelors rooming together. In most cases, they worked in tandem to charm Reuben's many female visitors, but not tonight. Tonight, he was a traitor. As he moved toward the living room, the somber voice of Lara San Giacomo reached his ears. Leah had gotten into his DVR and turned on one of his favorite TV shows, Snapped, featuring women who had a psychotic break and killed someone. He was in real trouble if she was getting ideas from it. "It's late," he said in a decent enough tone as he rounded the corner and leaned against the wall. "I hope you're here to kiss and make up." There was no denying Leah was a beauty. If things didn't go well, he would miss waking up to the sweet smell of her long, bleach blonde hair and blissful smile after a night of horizontal theatrics that left them both drained. She marred that vision now, her feet tucked underneath her on his couch, anger slouching her shoulders in an off-putting way. Cat snuggled on the back of the sofa while she stroked his head. Reuben heard his purring from across the room. Stupid Cat needed to remember who fed him. Leah said, "This is how you like it, right? Me coming over late, time for only one thing?" He ignored her attitude and gave her his best come-hither smile. "You say that like it's a bad thing." She scanned his body from head to toe, her eyes crawling over the erection pushing at the fly of his jeans. He rolled his hips under the attention. He might turn this around, or so his ego shouted from the rafters. Her face turned from bad to worse. "I can see you're in a good mood. Who put that smile on your face, huh? 'Cause it sure wasn't me." The chink in his armor, or amour, showed the moment he realized she wasn't going to come around. "You shouldn't sell yourself short," he half-joked. Surprise, she wasn't in a fun mood. "Come on, I was working, you know that." She said, "On your latest case, I presume?" Round one. His instincts had been spot on, which made him good at his job, but also meant his night was shot. "This is a bad time to pick a fight. If that's the only reason you're here, then maybe you should go home." He stood away from the wall. "We can do this tomorrow at a decent hour." "Don't dismiss me," she said, hurt, making her voice shaky, and after the shaky voice came tears. God, please make her stop. He said, his voice rising, "You came over here." He was at a loss for how to salvage this conversation before it dissolved into him apologizing for something he didn't do, only to say something he was sure to regret. He didn't want to hurt her. "You're crossing a line, Leah. I didn't give you a key to my house so you can come waltzing in here anytime you want, making demands on me. I'm not your cat sitter, your fuck toy, your whatever the hell else you take me for. I'm a human being with feelings." He paced into the den and back to the living room, anger making his arms rigid. He said, "I thought we were clear. We agreed, you agreed, in spelled out terms what this is. We were supposed to be having fun." His use of the past tense hung heavily in the air between them. "And when the fun stops, we're supposed to be honest with each other. Is that what this is? Because I'm not..." He sighed. "I can't give more than this." Who is she? She asked. He blinked hard, as if she'd slapped him. This is an open relationship, Leah, and for once there is no one else. Not yet. Denise was a case. What had gone down between them earlier was a simple flirtation, and technically she had rejected him. He wasn't about to tell Leah that he had hopes of changing Denise's mind. Leah tossed a stack of pictures on the coffee table, and they spread, a few of them falling onto the hardwoods. Who is Denise? Reuben's ears filled with white noise. Hearing her name used like a derogatory slur across Leah's lips, knowing she had snooped through the case evidence spread out before him, made him want to toss her out on her ass. He was despicable for even thinking it, and he would sooner walk out than act on it. Nevertheless, the impulse simmered underneath the surface. When he spoke, his voice was quiet. You went through my private work files? She ran her hands through the pile of photos, pulled one out, and lifted it for him to see. He had memorized all of them and knew which one she would throw in his face before she revealed it. It was an innocent shot of two women by the pool, but when Denise had taken her bikini top off, he was staring into the lens and his finger slipped and pushed the button. He hadn't seen any frontal action, but he'd captured a good bit of side boob. He couldn't justify the actions that came later either, printing the frame, keeping it for himself. He had kept all of them for himself. It wasn't exactly professional, and he was planning on destroying them, eventually. Every man had a despicable side they hid from women. Being caught red-handed sucked, and shame turned his head into a lit match. All right, he said. Time for you to leave. Leah glowered at him, planting her hands on the couch as though she had more to say. Work files? Those pictures are creepy and you know it. Are you stalking her? It's my job, he yelled, taking the bait. He wised up to her agenda and lowered his tone. I can't discuss cases with you. Come on. When she didn't move, he reiterated, out! She was clearly startled, and her mouth hung open for a moment, spurring Reuben to walk toward her. He grabbed her firmly by the arm and lifted her off his couch. She snatched her arm from his grip. Don't you put your hands on me. I'll call the police. His eyebrows rose. He pulled his phone out of his back pocket. Take your pick. I've got a few on speed dial. Fucking asshole. She pushed his shoulders in a fit, then turned and grabbed her sweater off the arm of the couch. When she spun around to spew more hate, he was right on her, his hands in the air, crowding her toward the door. She went to grab the knob, and he leaned against the panel, holding his hand out, palm up. The key. She looked into his eyes with tears streaming down her face. Please, he said, gentler this time. She said, all I wanted to do was talk. You're out of control, you know. What are you planning to do, hit on her? And say what? I've been taking creepy as fuck photos of you for the past few weeks, but you can trust me. She made an ugly noise. You're a joke, a big fat nothing, completely empty inside. You were right, there's nothing you have to offer a woman, not one goddamn thing. All you do is take. You feed off of us and then you throw us away. His glare didn't waver, but inside the truth settled in the pit of his stomach like a jagged stone. Her words whispered to his soul, where he unequivocally knew right from wrong, and he was wrong. He kept the notion of it in a locked box marked, Do Not Disturb. Plausible deniability was the key. She dug her hand in her purse and threw his house key across the room. Then she turned and wrestled with the doorknob to get out. He said, numbly, Why don't you take a few days to calm down? Then, if you feel like it, give me a call. A call. He opened the door for her, and Kat slipped out between their feet. Reuben cursed and yelled after him. Leah stopped at the edge of the porch, her makeup a smeared mess. Memory took over, and her face blurred into the background. Reuben was a kid again, 14. His mother's latest boyfriend had run out on her, and he walked in on the aftermath. Her face had dissolved into a scary mask. Black and glittery green ran from her eyes down her cheeks, turning muddy where they mixed with her heavily applied bronzer. Her mouth, swollen from crying, stretched into a grimace. He didn't want to spend the next few hours holding her, listening to her ponder out loud questions he was too naive to answer, like why men were shit, why they were irresponsible, why they were users. He had relived this train wreck over and over, so he thought up an excuse to work late at the diner. He was underage, but the owner would give him food and cigarettes in exchange for bussing tables and washing dishes for a few hours. His mother yelled as he stumbled out the door and slammed it, too afraid to look back and see the desperation on her face. The walls were tissue paper thin, no match for her screeching voice. "Go on, leave then, just like all the others, just like your dad. You don't care about anyone but yourself, selfish bastard." Guilt twisted his gut and he swallowed acid. They had only each other, no matter how toxic their relationship had become since he'd hit puberty. He should have stayed, but he couldn't stomach it anymore. Being the fall guy whenever his mom got torn up over a loser made him feel helpless, used. He saw no end in sight to his suffering as he ran toward the fire exit at the end of the hall. Down the stairs he flew until he burst out of the heavy exterior door. He paced under the streetlight for a minute, crushing cockroaches underfoot as the guilt of not being there for his own mother crushed him. He tried to convince himself to go back upstairs, but there was no use in both of them being miserable. Life so far had been one continuous free-falling shit show. With no rules and no boundaries set, he had been given free rein to ruin his life from too young an age. He didn't know what he was doing 100% of the time and would pay the price for his fuck-ups, in and out of juvie until he turned 18. He wanted out so badly. More than once he had contemplated a permanent solution to his problems, a way to sort of hard boot this life and take another crack at it with better circumstances. But not tonight. He planted his headphones over his ears and cranked up the volume of death metal to drown out his thoughts. The present came back into focus and he cleared his throat. "I'm sorry, Leah. I'm sorry you're hurt." Shoving his hands in his pockets, he shifted his feet and continued. "I don't mean to be an asshole, but I don't know. I guess I can't help myself." He studied her features that had transformed from elegance to beast, and he was the cause. Why couldn't he be a creator, a facilitator of something good, something beautiful? He walked toward her to wipe the tears from her cheeks. "You're better off." He dropped his hand after the slightest touch. "Go home now, before we wake the neighbors." She stood before him, searching his features. "You never would have come around, would you? You're fucked up. You know that, right?" He clenched his teeth so hard that pain lanced through his jaw. "Okay, time to go, for real this time." Her feet dragged at first, but she made it down the porch steps. "I feel sorry for you. You're doing me a huge favor," she yelled back at him. He raised a hand to wave her off. "See you later, much later." His stomach muscles unclenched in relief as she shut her car door, started her car, and pulled away from the curb. Telling her goodbye was like ripping a Band-Aid off slowly, taking a good piece of skin with it. Damn, Leah was right. She wasn't going to be the one to make him change his ways. He wasn't sure any woman could. Okay, that concludes chapter 4. And now I want to race to chapter 5. Hopefully you do too. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the little bell icon. And can't wait to see what happens next.